Marvel doesn't always remove Thunderbolts members with dramatic endings. Sometimes they simply disappear from continuity. One roster change, one storyline shift, and characters who once played major roles quietly fade into the background. Former villains, anti-heroes, and powerful operatives with real potential suddenly stopped appearing as Marvel moved in new directions. They didn't die heroic deaths or receive proper conclusions. They were just left behind over time. Even longtime fans barely remember some of them today. But how do important Thunderbolts members vanish so completely from Marvel history? Here are 10 Thunderbolts members who vanished from Marvel continuity. At number 10 is Jolt or Hallie Takahama. Hallie Takahama, better known as Jolt, was the very first new recruit to join the original Thunderbolts and served as the vital moral center for the entire book. As the ultimate hero fangirl done right, she was an audience surrogate who genuinely believed the team were heroes, heavily focused on as the emotional heart of the classic run. She constantly featured as the team's conscience across dozens of issues, making her wildly popular with fans. Her biggest moment defined the franchise, discovering the team's true identity as the Masters of Evil and inspiring them to actually rebel against Baron Zemo to become the heroes they were pretending to be. So, how did someone so important vanish? Despite her popularity, she was eventually killed, resurrected with a much darker redesign, abruptly shipped off to Counter-Earth, and effectively completely forgotten. Subsequent writers simply wanted edgier rosters, leaving this cornerstone character stuck in comic book limbo with only extremely rare background cameos today. At number 9 is Charcoal or Charles Burlingame. Charles Burlingame, operating as Charcoal, brought fresh teenage energy to the roster during Fabien Nitieza's tenure. Created through a famous magazine contest, he was heavily pushed as the misguided kid desperately trying to walk a righteous path, becoming deeply woven into the squad's interpersonal drama. His defining triumph arrived when he definitively rejected his former criminal masters, standing firmly alongside his new allies until his tragic death in battle against Graviton. Given his narrative momentum, his sudden erasure from the page is jarring. He wasn't written out due to storyline fatigue. A real-world rights dispute between Marvel and the contest winner sparked an absolute executive order. Executives ordered his immediate death and forbade future appearances. Consequently, this promising young hero remains legally buried, permanently scrubbed from the publisher's history forever. The corporate clash ensured that a character explicitly designed by the fandom would never see the light of day again, robbing the title of a truly unique perspective moving forward. At number 8 is Joystick or Janice Janicescu. Janice Janicescu injected chaotic, wildly unpredictable, thrill-seeking elements into the new Thunderbolts era as the covert operative Joystick. Readers immediately gravitated toward her witty banter and highly lethal capabilities, making her a breakout anti-heroine whose moral ambiguity commanded intense focus. Her narrative peaked in spectacular, devastating fashion when she viciously double-crossed her teammates during the Civil War event. Siding with the Grandmaster, she betrayed the team to steal Baron Zemo's Moonstones. What followed this explosive climax was sheer silence. Once her deceit was exposed and she was utterly defeated, she was simply thrown into a cell and discarded by the editorial team. No subsequent creator ever bothered to pick up those specific plot threads again. Over 10 years have passed without a single panel dedicated to her whereabouts, leaving her to rot in an off-page penitentiary while other villains constantly break out. The sheer suddenness of her exclusion highlights how quickly favored concepts can be scrapped without a second thought. And somehow, the treatment of these characters only gets harsher from here because the next Thunderbolt actually achieved real growth before Marvel threw it all away. At number 7 is Headsman or Cleven Fording. Cleven Fording wielded a terrifying executioner persona as Headsman, yet he secretly functioned as the unexpected conscience of Norman Osborn's ruthless Dark Reign Black Ops squad. During one of Marvel's most grim publishing initiatives, he was gifted a surprisingly poignant journey, transforming from generic muscle into someone yearning for true nobility. The climax of his growth saw him bravely refusing to execute prisoners alongside his teammates, a moral stand that ultimately cost him his life when he was shot in the head shortly after. But while comic book deaths are usually temporary, his reward for this profound evolution was being permanently left in the grave. Once the Osborn era concluded, all memory of his sacrifice was instantly discarded. His demise served only to generate cheap emotional anguish for the surviving cast. He became nothing more than cannon fodder masquerading as deep character development, ensuring that nobody would ever reference his fleeting heroism or tragic downfall in any subsequent major crossover storylines ever again. At number 6 is Troll or Gunnar Sigurvald. Gunnar Sigurvald infused Luke Cage's redemption project with feral ferocity as Troll, the wild Asgardian hybrid recruited during the Raft era. Offering unique humor and immense physical power among hardened inmates, she showed massive breakout potential and received significant promotional pushes during the Fear itself tie-ins. Her absolute loyalty to her newfound family was cemented when she fiercely defended her peers against the underbosses amidst a chaotic, large-scale prison riot. Yet, her rising star was extinguished almost overnight by shifting corporate initiatives. When the Marvel Now relaunch abruptly reformatted the title into a Red Hulk-led military strike force, she was casually jettisoned from the cast without explanation. Since that abrupt transition, she has languished in complete obscurity, relegated to nothing more than a voiceless extra padding out mythological crowd scenes. It remains incredibly frustrating that such a compelling visual design and fun personality could be tossed aside simply because the publisher demanded a radically different thematic direction for the comic book. At number 5 is Centurious or Noah Black. Noah Black occupied a completely different niche as Centurious, serving as the brilliant, scheming intellectual foil to the traditional brawlers under Cage's leadership. This cynical mad scientist dominated page counts as a pragmatic problem solver, proving essential to neutralizing the massive sci-fi threats that defined the climax of Jeff Parker's run. His supreme moment of triumph involved taking command of the Splinter faction, expertly navigating his desperate allies through an incredibly complex, perilous time travel labyrinth to ensure their survival. Curiously, he didn't suffer a tragic death or orchestrate a brutal betrayal. Instead, he fell victim to industry mechanics. The very second a new author took the reins, his narrative utility plummeted to zero. Dropping entirely off the radar, this once pivotal tactician hasn't graced a comic panel in years. The character was built up to be an irreplaceable mastermind, only to find himself erased by the simple reality that incoming creators rarely want to play with previous writers' obscure toy box selections. At number 4 is Atlas or Eric Jostin. Eric Jostin embodied the fundamental thesis of the original publication as Atlas, a career henchman genuinely striving to shatter his lifelong cycle of villainy. Burdened by a desperate, tragic thirst for approval, he anchored the franchise's early years with his towering physical presence and deep emotional vulnerability. His ultimate breakthrough occurred when he finally defied his longtime abuser and commander, Baron Zemo, putting everything on the line to shield his companions and romantic interest, Dallas Riordan. Sadly, decades of hard-earned progression meant absolutely nothing to future writers. Time and time again, his nuanced growth was forcefully erased, repeatedly resetting him into a generic antagonist for other heroes to defeat. Having his complex journey constantly dismantled, the nuanced hero he became effectively vanished from continuity. While he technically still appears in modern iterations, he has been completely stripped of his emotional depth, dragged out only to serve as generic nostalgic muscle or a background punching bag. This repetitive assassination of his core personality destroyed any reader investment, leaving a founding powerhouse to fade away into a truly depressing state of endless background humiliation without purpose. But now we're entering the most frustrating losses of all, where years of incredible character development were completely erased overnight. At number 3 is Radioactive Man or Chen Lu. Chen Lu was masterfully elevated from a one-dimensional menace into a deeply philosophical, fan-favorite anti-hero as Radioactive Man. Functioning as a stoic, highly intellectual, registered superhuman, he fought tirelessly to overcome his monstrous public reputation. His profound gravitas made him the indispensable calm anchor amidst the terrifying chaos of Osborn's regime, beautifully highlighted by a tragically doomed romance with Songbird. He felt inescapable, playing crucial roles across massive publishing events. However, his sophisticated tenure ended unceremoniously with an administrative deportation back to China. That geopolitical exit systematically stripped away every ounce of his hard-won nuance, devolving him backward to serve as cannon fodder for other properties. Today, the brilliant, reformed tactician is entirely gone. While he still exists in continuity as a member of China's People's Defense Force, his hard-won one nuance was entirely erased, devolving him back into an outdated, standard-issue foreign asset whenever a minor threat is needed. Marvel essentially decided that preserving a recognizable foreign adversary held vastly more commercial value than maintaining one of their most fascinating tales of personal reinvention, dooming him to an endless loop of predictable, boring villainy. At number 2 is Fixer or Techno or Paul Norbert Ebersol. Paul Norbert Ebersol stood as a core pillar from day one, acting as the longest-serving technical support across almost every iteration for a decade. Whether operating as Fixer or Techno, his complete lack of conventional ethics constantly challenged his peers' idealistic aspirations, driving a staggering amount of interpersonal conflict and overarching plot. In an uncharacteristically selfless climax, the immoral genius voluntarily surrendered his own linear existence, trapping himself within a temporal loop to preserve reality and rescue his friends. Though he eventually escaped that paradox, the event provided a convenient excuse to sideline him. Modern editors clearly favor utilizing newer, highly recognizable technological inventors, leaving this consequential legacy founder largely isolated in temporal limbo, dusted off solely for brief, nostalgic anniversary specials. The tragedy lies in the fact that his ultimate sacrifice was weaponized by executives to write him completely out of the ongoing universe, treating his vast institutional knowledge as obsolete baggage rather than a valuable storytelling asset. At number 1 is Mach X or Abner Jenkins. Abner Jenkins represented the absolute pinnacle of what this franchise was designed to achieve, transforming from the blue-collar criminal beetle into the highly respected squad leader Mach X. He was the living, breathing proof that total rehabilitation was possible within this universe, cementing himself as a deeply beloved, extensively featured cornerstone. His apex was undeniably profound, willingly surrendering to authorities and returning to a maximum security cell to finish his original sentences, ensuring he could operate legally as a legitimate champion of justice upon release. Yet, this magnificent legacy was utterly disrespected. He made the ultimate sacrifice by detonating his own armor to stop Baron Zemo, but in a universe where major heroes are resurrected constantly, this magnificent legacy was casually cast aside. For years, he remained definitively dead, his triumphs completely erased from active storylines until only very recently, when rumors of him being dragged back as a mindless cyborg for the One World Underdoom event finally surfaced, proving it takes a literal universe-altering reboot just to remember he exists. These Thunderbolts members vanished too quietly. Comment who deserves a return, subscribe now, and stay tuned for more Marvel Deep Dives.